everyone, this is Hua. Welcome to my channel. This is part 3 of Dellanna. Parts 1 and 2 can be found in the videos below. I hope that you are enjoying this story. Please leave a comment on your thoughts. Enjoy!
Without love in your heart, without love by your side, without love playing part, tell me what you do.
Dellanna. The weekend had arrived, and I was more glad than usual to accept it. Kate kept her shop closed on weekends, even though it would have brought her more business. She liked having the time to herself, and I didn't mind. As I rolled over in bed, I thought about what I was going to do today. My jaw was finally beginning to feel normal again. As I dressed in jeans and a sweater, I decided I would go visit the History Museum and get lost in stories. As I walked out to the garage where I stored my car, I noticed my neighbor was taking the garbage out. He turned around and I stopped walking. He'd shaved and looked like he finally showered. Boy, he was also quite handsome. But then again, if he shared the same jeans as Connor, it was no surprise. He winked at me, smiled, and walked inside the house. I stood frozen in place and had to repeat in my head what just happened. Did he just wink at me? Did he just smile? And for some odd reason, why did I like it? I spent the day drowning in history and stopped to have a light lunch at their cafe. As I sat down and opened the bottle of water, I heard a chair being pulled out beside me. I turned to find my neighbor settling into his chair and smiling at me. He changed into a black V-neck sweater, and I could smell a different scent of maleness coming from him. He smiled at me and then extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Jason. I'm Connor's handsome brother. Although I have a feeling you already know that," he said. I took his hand. "I'm Dellanna, the one who got kicked in the face by his angry ex's new lover. Although I have a feeling you already know that too." Smiling, he replied, "Cute name, honestly." "So, you do know how to talk without chewing people to pieces." He shrugged. "I was in a bad mood." "Every day for 6 years? Wow, how lucky of me to experience this side of you." He leaned back in his chair. "Trust me, I'm not all that bad. I just like my privacy. Is that so wrong?" "No, of course not, but there's a kinder way of going at it than chewing people to pieces. The kids are all afraid of you. They call you Mr. Grinch." He put his hand on his heart as if he was hurt. That actually wounded me, seriously. I smiled and leaned in closer to him. "You're having a conversation with me right now. Are you sure that's not going to damage your reputation?" Jason leaned in halfway to be closer to me. "And you're actually cuter than I thought you were." My smile faded as I pulled away from him. I watched as he leaned back in his chair, and his eyes glazed into mine. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I suddenly didn't feel hungry anymore. The longer he stared, the harder it was to find reasons to hate him. "Look, I'm not really mean, okay? I do have a nicer side to me, but I tend to forget that people like poetry when being turned down. I, however, just like to hand it out. Some folks can't take it that way. I have a belief that if I'm going to hurt you, I should just go ahead and say it and get it over with. You know, it's like pulling off a Band-Aid. Why prolong the pain?" I laughed and reality set in. I stood up from where I sat and picked up my coat. "Thank you for that." "For what?" I slipped on my coat and pushed to my chair. "For making me see that I was stupid to think otherwise of you. You know, for a split second there, I thought you were human enough to carry on a conversation. But your rudeness reminded me that I was walking on thin ice." Jason winced as if it actually hurt him. "Wow, you know, you have a talent for knowing how to wound people." "Well, why don't you record yourself someday and watch it? And then you'll know who's talented and who is really wounding others. Have a good day." I walked out the door and the cold air hit me hard. As I was sitting inside, the temperature had dropped. I made my way to my car and got in. When I drove home, my encounter with Jason played in the back of my mind. What was his intention when he sat down to talk to me? And what did he mean when he said that I was cuter than he thought? This entire time, I thought I was invisible to him because he'd barely looked my way. I shivered and pushed it back into a place where nothing mattered. When I got home, I parked the car in the garage and was glad to see that Jason's car was not in the driveway. I hurried inside and turned the heat on full blast. I changed into warm sweats and an oversized sweater just in time to see snow falling outside. I love the snow falling. I just hated shoveling, and even though the little sidewalk I had, the driving was enough to make me feel insanely crazy. I put on a pot for tea and had just settled down sorting through the magazines on the table when the doorbell rang. I got up and pulled the door open, only to find Connor staring at me with snowflakes falling on his hair. I crossed my arms, not caring if he was freezing. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He smiled, the pleasant light forming in his eyes. "Can I come in?" "Why?" "I thought you were big on manners. You know, it's rude to let your guests stand outside while it's snowing." I laughed. "And you should know that uninvited guests have no place inside a home." Touché. The look on his face made me cave, and I groaned as I pushed the door open. He walked in and shook the snow off of him as I closed it. The pot began screaming, and I walked to pour myself one and then thought better of it. I grabbed another one and made him one too. He removed his shoes and was walking into the kitchen when he started to remove his coat. I walked to hand him a teacup, and he took it, muttering a very sincere thank you. "So, you never answered me. What are you doing here?" I asked. He took a sip of his tea and sat down. "I was in the neighborhood." I was about to argue, and he must have read my mind because he beat me to it. "I came to visit my brother, but he's not home, so I thought I'd take a chance here with you." "Your brother is at the museum." "How do you know that?" "Because I ran into him over there earlier, and he was trying very hard to flirt with me." "I don't like that." I pulled out a chair and gestured for him to sit. He did, as told, and I watched as he ran a hand through his hair. Seriously, he was very handsome, and I really did feel as if my bones were jumping out of my skin seeing him this near to me. But I had to think about my heart that had been torn apart and still was not completely glued together yet. "So," I began before he had a chance to talk, "how's that ex-lover of yours? Has her new beau kicked anyone lately?" He smiled, knowing I was joking. "He better not. I haven't forgiven him for the last kick he gave out." "Can I ask you something?" "If it's something I can answer, sure." I put my elbows on the table, and the question burning in the back of my mind came out. "How is it that a woman like her can give up a man who looks like you?" Connor took a long drink from his tea and shrugged his shoulders as he set his cup down. "You're asking the wrong person. I wish I had the answer. I've been racking my brain wondering the same thing. And the only thing I did was love her, but apparently it wasn't enough. It really sucks when you're never enough for someone." "Can I ask you something?" I shrugged. "If it's something I can answer, sure." Smiling, he asked, "Why are you not with anyone?" "How do you know I'm not?" "Oh, come on. That's gotta hurt you more than it hurt me." I tucked a loose strand behind my ear and dropped my gaze into my tea. And then I looked up to find him staring at me with inquisitive eyes. I found myself at a loss of words. The silence dragged on, and then he became uncomfortable. "I'm sorry. Maybe that was an inappropriate question to ask," he whispered. I somehow felt obliged because he had poured his heart out to me before. No, it's okay. It's just something I'm not very proud to talk about. I'm still trying to get over it in a way." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dig up old wounds." "Too late," I whispered. I had a fiancé. We were going to be married. I had the wedding dress, the cake, the entire ceremony at my feet, but I was missing the groom on the day of the wedding. He was already on his honeymoon, but the bride wasn't me. I was left at the altar with 200 guests who felt sorry for me. I was waiting for it. I was waiting to hear how sorry he was and the pitiful look in his eyes. But instead, what I saw was the same pain lingering in his eyes that lingered in my soul. He knew all too well that hurt that came with something like this. "It's his loss, really, because you're such a prize," he said. Connor. I was watching her as she washed the dishes in the kitchen. I don't know how it escaped me the first time how flawless her skin was. I had been too focused on my misery that I had somehow missed how beautiful she really was. Even the strands of her hair had some soft lights in the ray from the shades that caught them. She wasn't quite as curvy as I'd liked her to be, but then again, she wore those god-awful clothes to hide her woman figure. Who knew what she really looked like underneath? I had spent the afternoon listening to her past, and I realized that we were two of the same creatures. We had been left withering in pain as the other person moved on, as if everything that we gave to them was nothing. By the tone of her voice and how she told her story, I knew that she was still fighting her pain. I wasn't sure why I found her to be interesting. She was by far the most uncoordinated woman I'd ever met. She had no sense of fashion. When she spoke, it seemed as if she was in a world away from me, but something inside her eyes reached deep into my soul and held tight. It stung, actually, and it constricted my breathing. I didn't know why, and the reason bothered me. When she finished, she turned to look at me, and our gazes met. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker in her eyes, but it was gone as soon as it appeared. "What do you have planned for today?" I asked. She reached for a towel and began wiping her hands. She shrugged and set the towel down, folding it into small halves until it could no longer be folded. "I don't know. I was sort of thinking I'd get lost in a good book." "Get lost in a good book? That is something I haven't done in a long time." "How could you not do that?" I shrugged, and the answer didn't come to me. I don't know. I just never had the time to do it for a while now. I mean, I was always busy with my job and Sheila. I felt I was always working, and every time I stopped by a bookstore, it was either to buy a gift for someone or just to sit at the tables and work. I love books. I love how I can pretend my life is good, how I can be anyone I want to be without worry. I stood up and walked to her. She didn't back up, but I saw that she had fear in her eyes. "Dellanna, how could you worry about yourself? I mean, you're so put together. I've never met anyone who knew exactly what she wanted more than you. You say what's on your mind without fear of others. You live life the way you want to, and you sure as heck don't care about what anybody says about your style of clothing." She blushed and looked away. I took that moment to reach for her, but she looked away from me. I stood there like a fool, and when I turned around, she was already cleaning her cleaned living room. Why do women do that? Why do women sought out to clean up when the conversation gets tough? I have a lot of work to do. As you can see, I'm trying to finish my wall. I got the hint. She wanted me gone. But instead, I put my hands together and leaned against her kitchen counter. She looked up and raised her eyebrows. "I'll help you." "No." "Why not?" She shrugged. "Because I don't want you here. I have 2 hands. You can get this wall patched up faster if you have 4 hands instead of 2. I'm here to solely help you out. I owe you that much." For a second there, I thought she was going to say no, but after several blank stares and a long breath, she caved in.
When I think about the way we used to be, when I think about the things you took from me, I know that I am so much better. When I look at what I've done now that we...
If anyone ever told me trying to impress someone was not exhausting, I would laugh out loud. I would not have believed it until now. The whole afternoon, my arms felt as if they were going to be ripped from my socket, and my entire body felt as if it had been hit by a train. Although I tried to keep on a happy grin and pretend the work was not slowly killing me, I knew that she could see right through me. She was not dumb, and to think of her that way was an insult to her brilliance. I had never been happier to see the sun fall than when it did that evening. When she brought me the glass of lemonade, I gulped it down clean in 2. The dinner she had been cooking halfway through painting was now beginning to make my mouth water. When she pulled the ham out of the stove, I literally drooled as I made my way to the dining table. I ate as if I had never eaten before, and while she slowly forked a few ham into her mouth, I gulped down my food. "You must not work too hard in your life," she said. I stopped midway and looked up at her. "I do. I'm just hungry." "Sure. Like I didn't notice how you had to hold your breath to continue painting because you felt your limbs were going to be torn off? Or how you exhaled loudly when you thought I was out of earshot?" I felt my cheeks blush. Should I continue? I put my fork down. Okay. So I lead an easy life. Why am I being punished?" "You're not. I'm just saying, why is it so hard for you to admit to being overworked? You could have said you were tired and needed to take a rest. I would not have thought of any less of you. I shrugged. So I didn't want to bruise my ego. Is that a crime? No, but it would have helped you look more like a man in my eyes. I didn't know how to react to that, so I just lowered my eyes and stuffed my mouth full of ham. So, how's your ex's new boyfriend? I put my fork down. Really? You're seriously asking me that? That's all I know about you. Okay, I had to give her that. I wiped my mouth and leaned back in my chair, murmuring my appreciation for her food and complimenting her on being a good cook. She stared at me, waiting, and I cleared my throat. Can I fix my image with you? I hate to be known as that guy who got you beat up by his ex-lover's new boyfriend. It's a little late to change that, but if your background is good enough, I might just revise my thoughts on how I feel about you. I laughed. I like your sense of humor. Well, what would you like to know? Whatever it is you want to tell me. Nodding, I replied, okay. I work in architectural design for one of the largest companies in Minnesota. I just won a bidding to build the newest dome in downtown St. Paul. As you already know, my grumpy brother is your neighbor, and he's a lot nicer than he's let on. She stared at me long and hard, and then she said, your other story is a lot more exciting. I paused, and I watched as her expression didn't change. I just literally spilled my heart out to you. You call that spilling your heart out? Jeez, I've read a comic book that had more details than that. Your life is pretty damn boring. So I like working. You can't sit there and label me. I mean, from what my brother has told me, I can safely assume that you're a spinster who may remain a spinster for the rest of your life. And right after I said that, I finally realized what had come out of my mouth. I remembered her broken romance, and I kicked myself in the butt. But what was unexpected was a feeling that tugged in my heart when tears filled her eyes. The glasses didn't hide her emotions, and when one tear dropped down, I got up and rushed to her. As soon as I touched her cheeks, my entire body came to my knees, and my lips slammed against hers. Dellanna. When I felt his lips against mine, I wasn't sure what pounded first, my heart with a thud that I had never felt before, or my head with questions of what the hell was going on. I just liked how it felt against mine. I didn't want it to stop. I was sure that it was only a few seconds, but it felt like forever. When he released my cheeks, his eyes told me he wasn't sure what made him do what he did. I stared and wondered how I looked, because if I looked anything like how I felt, it was pure idiotic. My breath had become ragged, and my ribs felt as if they were constricted to expand. By the time I felt ready to breathe, I was at a loss of words. My lips felt hot, and I was dizzy. I reached out to hold onto the table, but ended up reaching for his arm. I meant to stable myself, but in his eyes it looked as if he read my gesture to keep him near. I'm sorry, he whispered softly. I don't know why I did that. I instantly released my hand. His words cooled off what I felt in my body. I pushed my chair back up. I think you should leave. He stood and nodded. He picked up his coat, dressed, and left so fast that I had no time to stop him. By the time I had my thoughts gathered together, he was gone. He had kissed me. He had kissed me, but why did he did it? That was the mystery. The problem was that I certainly enjoyed his lips against mine. But why? Did he feel sorry for me? Did he felt he owed it to me because he called me a spinster? And what the hell did his brother tell him about me? Had he been spying on me? Suddenly, his kissing me didn't bother me anymore. I wanted to know more about what Jason told him. Did those two brothers plan to destroy me? Feeling anger rise in me, I walked to go outside and went next door. I knocked and knocked until Jason opened. I started yelling at him as soon as he opened the door. Who do you think you are? Do you think you have the right to spy on me? What the hell have you been telling your brother about me? Are you two spies or something? What does my single life have to do with it anyways? He leaned against the doorframe and smiled at me. When I was finished, he cleared his throat. Are you done? I shrugged. I think so. Jason pulled me into his house, and that was when I realized I came over without a coat. I didn't even feel the cold. But what shocked me more was that his house was cleaner than mine. I felt shameful for the words I had named him in my mind. He must have guessed because he bowed with a grin and plopped on the couch without a word. I stood there like an idiot and didn't move. Well, you couldn't shut up a minute ago and now you're quiet as a mouse. Let me guess. Bipolar much? He asked. I opened my mouth in a shock. How dare you? I was just taking in the house and liking how clean it was. Yes, I know. You thought I was a bum. Oh, I mean Mr. Grinch, as you so kindly shared with me. I covered myself with my arms and cleared my throat loudly. He was still sitting there as if nothing I said bothered him. Why was he so cool and calm? What did he do for a living anyway? I walked to sit across from him and pointed my finger at him. Are you a cop? I asked. He shrugged. Why do you ask? I don't know, but you just don't seem to be like the 9-to-5 kind of guy like your brother. Correction. My brother is not a 9-to-5 kind of guy. He's a 9-to-9 kind of guy, and then he takes all his work home with him. That's why his lady gave him the boot. Or should I say, you got the boot from her new beau. I gasped loudly at his words. Oh, stop talking about that. He really did tell you about that, didn't he? Jason laughed and leaned forward on his knees. Yeah, he did. Kind of an asshole thing to do, really. Sheila was hot, but she was a dimwit. She didn't even know how to spell secretary. Laughing, I replied, You're not very nice. And then I remembered why I came over in the first place. Have you been spying on me? Why do you ask? Did my brother say something? Why do you assume that he has said anything? I don't know, because I told him what you look like underneath your clothes. My gasp was loud as I shot to my feet and for the first time in my life walked to hit a man across the cheek. But because I was super slow and had never done it before, he already caught on what I was going to do and stood up. Instead of me hitting him, he grabbed my neck and smacked his lips against mine. The kiss burned me so deep and so hard that I was left breathless and panting like a dog hungry for bacon. The speed my heart was thumping at was so fast, I was surprised I didn't explode right there. The stars I saw was countless, and my toes actually curled. This was nothing like I'd ever felt before. And then I let out a low groan against his lips. And when he pulled away, he smacked his lips and smiled. I knew you'd taste good. I went from being a spinster to kissing two brothers in one day. Oh my Lord! I watched Jason's eyes flickered with light and for the first time realized that he had a different look than Connor. This was going to be hard to do. Could I balance two men, especially brothers, in my life? And why was I thinking about this when Jason was staring at me as if he wanted to eat me? What are your thoughts? He asked. My who? I questioned. He laughed and touched my cheek. You're funny. I kind of like you. The last few years of my life has been very entertaining watching you from my window. I took a step back and then turned to the window he was pointing to. Holy shit! His living room window looked directly into my bedroom window. No wonder he said he knew what I looked like underneath my clothes. I turned back to look at him and my mouth hung open as he crossed his arms, his muscles bulging from the effect. My cheeks flushed red and I felt the heat. Don't worry, darling. All the X-rated parts are all kept secret from others. I gasped loudly and my hands covered my cheeks. Oh my God! I didn't realize. Have you been watching me? Jason sat down on his couch and draped his foot over his knee, giving me a smile. Every night, 9 o'clock on the dot, and I'm ready for the greatest show on earth. Thank you for enjoying part 3 with me. Part 4 will be up shortly.